Can you tell us more about how you budgeted your time during the week, like Monday through Sunday? Did you have a breakdown of what you're going to do each day?
Usually I would spend, Monday would be sort of my recovery day from the previous week, where I would sort of not do anything and just sort of sit on ideas and rest. And then Tuesday I would usually start like having a nugget of an idea that I would think about. Wednesday and Thursday would usually be procrastination. And then Friday is when I would start panicking. Saturday is when I would make like most of the game, and then Sunday is all the finishing touches. It's sort of the gist of how it would go every week, even though some weeks I was better, some weeks I was worse, but for the most part it was sort of that weird panic Friday, Saturday, Sunday, oh gosh, I've had this idea brewing in my head all week and I've thought about it, but now I have to make it in such a short amount of time. Which meant that every single week I sort of would go, oh, okay, next week I'm going to budget my time better. And then the next week would come and I wouldn't do that, but I've learned that I'm really bad at budgeting time, which is a good outcome out of that. And everything would sort of vary. Like, I was also doing contract work at the time, so a lot of like my daytime would be spent doing work, like money work, which is why Thursday and Friday, or Wednesday and Thursday, would always sort of turn into procrastination, because I'd been procrastinating on work doing game a week, so I'd have to procrastinate on game a week to do work, and change that around all the time. So it was very week to week, you know, but that was the general gist that I would follow.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one who feels that way.
It's always easier to work when you see the deadline right in front of you. I mean, that's why, like, that's why you need the deadline, because the problem was before I started Game a Week, you know, I had these ideas in my head and I'd start working on them, but they wouldn't come to fruition at all because it was such a nebulous end goal. You know, oh, I'll make this idea. When? How long is it going to take? What is it going to do? And as soon as I started adding those weekly deadlines every single week, then it would, you know, force me Friday, Saturday, Sunday to actually just work on that and not say, oh yeah, I'll do it tomorrow, you know, whatever.
Right, right. I'm just curious, what program did you use to build your GDC presentation game?
That was all in Unity. Because that's, yeah, because I did most of my Game a Week games in Unity, and then the GDC presentation, since I just made that another game, that was all Unity as well.
So you mostly use Unity. Do you use any Adobe products or alternatives to Adobe for anything, like art assets?
No, I sort of, because I use Unity for the most part making games, and I would branch out to other technologies like week to week, like I made a Twine game, or I made some HTML5 games, stuff like that. But for the most part, I used Unity, and then any art that I would make, which I use the term art very loosely because I am not an art person. I am really, really bad at it. You know, I'd use whatever free tool, usually GIMP, to draw really crappy triangles or circles and color them. Or I'd go to like opengameart.org and find the least crappy kind and put that into my games. But for the most part, it was Unity and GIMP and maybe like pieces of paper that I would draw on and take pictures of. I'm not an art person. I'm real bad at art.
How do you relieve stress?
How do I relieve stress? I run a lot. I like running. It's a good stress reliever. Also, I play a lot of Destiny. Shooting things is really great for stress. Other than that, just sort of playing games and hanging out with friends and not looking at my computer is probably the best way to relieve stress. Not that looking at my computer causes stress, but it's nice to get away from the buzz of Twitter and the internet and all of that kind of stuff and just sort of not be connected to the rest of the world for a while. Like, I really like being inside all day, and I feel myself getting stressed out. I go, okay, I need to go outside. I need to be in, like, air. I don't care if it's, like, raining or cloudy or 10 degrees outside. I just need to be outside for a little bit.
Understood.
I don't know. Something not computer related is a good stress reliever for me.
So, back to the Game of Week, where did you find the time to do your write-up about your game after you were done panicking and finishing the game?
I mean, it wouldn't take very much long to write up about the game afterwards. Because a lot of it was I had a very simple structure for what I wanted to write about. I wanted to write about where the idea came from, what went right, what went wrong, and what I learned that week. So it was usually really simple to write up about. Because where the idea comes from, that's easy. I can always be like, oh yeah, I was outside and I saw a rock and the rock looked like a bird, and then I made a game about birds. That's where it came from. And the hardest part would always be figuring out what went right, because since I would always panic finish the game Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I could never find anything that went right because everything would go wrong. So that's always the part that would take the longest to write about. Because you have to look at this thing that you packed together that you're semi proud of and go, oh yeah, something went right here. And that can sometimes be really, really hard to find.
Would you do those
but for the
Monday mornings? You're right.
Yeah, usually
Sunday or Monday.
Yeah, usually Monday morning after sleeping and letting myself sleep in, just wake up and then look back, decompress the whole thing. And that's why I wouldn't really typically start a new game on that Monday, because I just sort of want that day to decompress. And I'd try and get it up by that night to have the write-up. And it would always depend on how much I was struggling with finding what went right or what the lesson learned was. Which a nice default lesson learned that I got to learn every week is that I'm bad at budgeting time. So if I didn't learn anything else, I could at least always say that.
What are some of your all-time favorite things about being a game designer?
I really like talking to other people about game design and game development, which sounds like a super cliche answer, but it's true, because everybody that you talk to has a different background and a different experience from you growing up, and a different view on games and what makes games good and what makes games bad. But there's always this common thread of a love for designing games and making games that's really easy to see when you talk to people like that. But it's interesting to see how that one common thread can split off in so many different ways. And so I really like talking to other game developers and sort of doing that thing where you get in that back and forth with each other of, oh, this would be an interesting game design idea. Oh, but why would that be interesting? It can go over here. And then you're no, but it can go over here. And then you sort of build on top of each other and just have these, interesting back and forths of why this would work or why this wouldn't work or why this would work over here but not work over here. Just the different ideas off everywhere. And it's always really interesting to sort of see that happen. So that's always really interesting and probably the funnest, most fun things about it.
Interesting answer. We sort of touched on your strengths and weaknesses already. You feel like one of your weaknesses is time management. Do you have any insight into what you think might be your biggest strength as a successful game dev?
I would say what is my biggest strength? This is like a job interview where you have to be my biggest strength is real impressive. I don't know. I tend to just sort of do things without thinking about them all that much, which I think is probably helpful.
Yeah.
Something like Train Jam was, oh, I was on a long train ride, and that sounds like it would be fun for a game jam, so I'll just book tickets, and maybe people will want to join me and come on this thing. It's kind of stupid, but maybe people will do it, and then people did it, and then it turned into this whole snowball effect of being a really cool thing. But I don't know, I just sort of did it without thinking too much about it. I looked into the refund policies of Amtrak, and that was about as far as I really researched anything before making Train Jam exist. But there's a lot of things I'll end up doing like that. Like when I left Boston and I did there for a year and a half, I didn't really have a plan after that. I just sort of didn't want to live there anymore and didn't want to live anywhere else. So I just left and traveled around for a year. And so I think that's one of my, it might also be a weakness, I don't know, but I think it sounds like a strength. It's worked out for me so far.
Yeah, you don't wait to ask permission. You're spontaneous.
Yeah, and just things, and even back to talking about getting into public speaking and stuff like that, a lot of that was just, yeah, I'll try this out and I'll do it, and I'll go over here and introduce myself to this person. Oh, this person runs this event. Okay, that worked out. Or oh, there's a party over here that looks like it might have important people. Yeah, I'm totally supposed to be here. I promise. I should be on the list. And then you go in, and it works out, like, I don't know, and it's funny because sometimes I will get, like, fixed with all the consequences, and then I won't do something, and then I always feel really bad about it, so it's better to just not think about it.
I'm glad you brought up Train Jam. Can you explain the logistics of it in a way that other user groups might replicate the experience? Like, for example, the Apple developers of Chicago want to do Train Jam Apple version.
I mean, probably exactly the same way I did it. Like I said, when I first wanted to make Train Jam, I just went onto the Amtrak website, I only booked 30 tickets the first year, because I was like, oh, there's no more than 30 people who will ever want to do this. So I booked 30 tickets. I put them up for sale on Eventbrite, thinking, okay, yeah, 52 hours, we can just get on there, plop our laptops down, and go for the whole 52 hours. And then those tickets sold out immediately, so I got 30 more tickets that year. And then, since I had so many people, it started snowballing into asking for sponsors, so that I could cover snacks and make the tickets a bit cheaper. And then the next year, I teamed up with GDC so that we would have a booth to show the games at afterwards, and reaching out to press and all of these things. I don't know, it's easy to replicate, a lot of it was reaching out to sponsors to get money to provide things that make the jam better. Like I said, like snacks, or like a pre-jam lunch, or like Wi-Fi devices, because there's no internet on the train, and stuff like that. So a lot of my time was spent figuring all that kind of logistics out, and then just making sure we would get there on time. And last year, what I started doing was having more like a code of conduct, and making sure to encourage people to have a good time and be friendly towards one another. And not that I had a problem with that before, but it's nice to sort of have that policy as a stated thing, as opposed to an implicit thing. It's explicit now that you have to be a pretty cool person to come on Train Jam. And I think that's a lot of the work that I put into something like that, is making sure that the environment is fun and creative and helpful to people. And that's why I wanted to get, sponsorship and handle a lot of that kind of stuff, so that people don't have to worry about, oh, I can't afford to eat while I'm on this thing because it's already kind of expensive, or I can't do this, or, oh, I'm going to be limited by that. Like, a lot of what I want to do is foster an environment that is fun and conducive to creating things. And I think that's one of the most important parts of replicating something like that, is making sure that you figure out what your morals and your core experience that you want out of that event, and force that to happen.
It was so fantastic. That's really great work that you're doing. Even if you had a mobile hotspot, like a Wi-Fi emitter, would it still not work on the train because you're passing by the cell towers too fast or something?
Yeah, well, so that's one of the funny things. So Amtrak has no Wi-Fi on the long trains. Like, they have it on the shorter trains, but not the ones that we're on. And the last 2 years, we've had sponsorship from Karma Wi-Fi, with their little Wi-Fi hotspots. That they connect to 4G only. So, like, the connection that we get throughout the United States is basically like Chicago, and then Denver, and then San Francisco. And that's the only time that we have any connectivity. But they've actually just released new devices that are 3G capable as well. So we're going to have a lot more coverage throughout the United States. But it'd still be just about as spotty as what you would have on a cell phone going through there. So there's still large swaths of Train Jam that have no internet connection whatsoever, which is super great, to be totally honest, because I find, and especially because I make it a point to remind everybody about 1,000 times that they're not going to have internet before they come on the jam, so they have their tools downloaded, they have their documentation downloaded. I also usually will have USB devices with, offline documentation for Unity or Yo-Yo or GameMaker and whatever. And I find that a lot of people, if they're prepared for it, can work just fine without internet. And it was something interesting that I saw this year on Train Jam, where by the last night, people would go to bed at 11 p.m. because they were done. And they were done because they didn't have the internet to distract them. Like, people always think you work slower without the internet, but it turns out that nope, you are constantly distracted by Facebook, I promise. So it creates like this really interesting, relaxed jam where people are just like, oh, we're just working, whatever. I'm a little frustrated that I can't figure this out, but I'll just do it some other way that I know how to do it. Okay, and now we're done, and we're done kind of early, and that's nice. The end. So it creates a really interesting environment, especially because then it also encourages a lot of communication between teams, which is something that I really like about Train Jam, is that it's not you form a team and you go off into your corner. Like, you form a team and you're still stuck on this train with them. So a lot of teams will talk to each other and share advice and share, different ways to do things. Or if somebody has a programming problem, they're actually forced to, like, ask their neighbor if they know the answer to it, as opposed to just going to Google and not bothering somebody. And so it ended up causing, like, a lot of inter-team communication and back and forth, which is just, I love it. Like, it's super great. You just have so many different teams just pushing things into other games. It's really, really nice.
That is awesome. So would you say you're a pretty well-traveled, worldly person?
I'm well-traveled in the Europes and America, I would say. I haven't actually made it to, like, the Asian parts of the world yet, which I'm working on it. I'm going to get there. But I would say I'm well-traveled in the Europes and America.
So Train Jam starts in Chicago. So since we're based here in Chicago, what do you know about the indie scene or the non-indie scene here in Chicago, and how does it compare to, say, Boston or New York in your experience?
So the indie scene in Chicago seems interesting because it seems like there's, like, a few different factions of it that all sort of know each other but don't, like, super play with each other all that much. Which this might just be me as an outsider looking in, but it's you know what I mean? Like, there's a few different parts, and they all are aware of each other's existence, and they all go to each other's things maybe, but they don't seem to, like, mesh together all that well, whether that's by accident or whatever. Which is funny because when I was in Boston, which is where I started my game development career, we had, like, 3 or 4 meetups that would happen every month, and even though they were all sort of focused towards different things, like we had our IGDA meetup and then our indie meetup or our Unity meetup, there was still a lot of, like, cross collaboration between all of them and sort of cross pollination. So it seemed like it was a lot more cohesive. But then also Boston was much more business focused because of all of the schools that were there, like the very business focused schools. Whereas I find, like, Chicago is a little bit more, hey, let's try this or let's do this, without so much of the let's make a business out of this immediately kind of mindset. So, and it's interesting because everywhere you go, you see little differences like that in all the communities. Like over here, when you go much more towards, like, the Nordic countries in Europe and a lot more of the sort of, like, very social welfare countries, you find a lot more, like, creative projects because they don't have to focus on making money hardly at all. Like, not that they don't have to, but they have a lot more leniency to just try something that may or may not work and is kind of weird. So you get a lot more experimental, funky things coming out of Nordic countries than you would out of somewhere like America, because, we need healthcare and insurance and all of these things to sustain, like, our baseline of life. So you can't just, rely on something else to cover you if you fail. So it's interesting to see how all those, like, different things affect the different areas.
Can you tell us what country you're currently in?
I'm in the Netherlands right now.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm 7 hours ahead of you, I think, in time.
Right. It's probably getting close to bedtime.
It's only 9 p.m. and it's Saturday.
So here's another question about women in technology. As one yourself, what do you want women considering a career in tech to know?
That's a hard one, because a lot of it is, like, I want them to know it's okay. Like, I know everything looks shitty a lot of the times when you look at women in technology. It's like, from the outside, a lot of what you see is, like, horrible stories, and horrible things do happen, and there are horrible stories. But at the same time, there are good stories that are often overshadowed by horrible stories. I think at GDC this year, at the One Reason to Be panel, I was on it, and there was a few other women on it, but Amy Henning, who was on it, gave a really wonderful speech about her very long and lucrative career in the games industry and how she has only had, you know, very positive experiences and she loves it and all of these things. It was really refreshing to hear a veteran game developer, woman game developer, just talk about how not everything is shit and things can be good. Um, and refreshing to just see it like, yes, horrible, horrible, horrible things do happen all of the time, but there's also pretty decent things that can happen, and you know, these are some of the best people that I've ever met with being in the games industry, and like some of the most fun I've ever had being in the games industry. And I know not everybody can say that, but you know, there are a lot of positives and good things to come out of it, and to not be totally scared by everything that you can hear about what's going on. But then to also be prepared that not everything is rosy and hunky-dory, like things are kind of shit sometimes. So I don't know, be prepared. Like, and I hate having to say be prepared, because you shouldn't have to be prepared for shit. That's the worst advice. But like, be prepared, but also it's not all terrible, and that's good to remember.
I understand your conflict of not wanting to something you shouldn't have to, but I don't know if it's like a little too high horse to say that women are oppressed in the games industry, but
Yeah.
just go out on that risk and think there's a little bit of oppression, maybe. I don't know, but
Yeah, it's a really weird double-edged sword, because you do have to be prepared for the crap things, but you shouldn't have to be prepared for the crap things. But you're gonna have to be prepared for the crap things. But there's not all crap things. It can be okay, but sometimes they're shit, etc., etc.